Welcome to Peninsula Seniors Out and About. Today we're back here at Tramp National Golf Club in Rancho Palos Verdes for the 20th Annual Concours d'Elegance. Let's go have a look. I'm here with Earl Rubenstein from the Automotive Driving Museum in El Segundo.
That's correct.
And what'd you bring today?
We brought a 1936 V12 convertible sedan, which is a magnificent car, and it's just behind me on my right side as you're looking at it.
Okay, let's have a look at this gem.
Okay, I'm going to show you some of the details on this 1936 V12 Packard convertible sedan. Over here we have the cormorant, which is the hood ornament. Packard had three different hood ornaments at the time, which is the Flying Lady, the cormorant, and the Sliding Boy. This is the second most popular one. The first one is the Flying Lady, which is the lady with her arms outstretched and a wheel between it. They call it the Flying Lady, or the Donut Chaser are some of the terms that are applied. These are the accessory lights that go on, parking lights. They were optional. These are the side mounts here. They were optional also. That when the car was ordered, you could have them or not have them. What we have here at the front are the little details. These are the balanced bumpers that are the vibrating to balance the engine. And over there we have the license plate frame, and a lot of people have them all chromed all the way to the top, but when they came from the factory, half of it was painted the body color. Another unusual feature is when the cars were delivered, all the welting on the body, which is like over here, were body colors. So if you had a white car, you had white welting. If you had a blue car, you had blue welting. A lot of people just think everything was black, but it's not quite that way. This is the V12. They came with covers over the wire wheels if you wanted them as an accessory item. Otherwise, the wheels had all the spokes in it. Those were part of the accessories. These are the side mounts. These were an accessory mirror that came on the top here. And then back in here, you have the driver's compartment and where the people sat back in here. It also has a roll-up rear window that comes in here. This comes up when you have the top up to protect the people in the back seat. And at the back end of the car is a trunk which sits on the luggage rack back here, which was an accessory item. And that trunk is also fitted luggage. So you had either 3 pieces or 4 pieces that were in the trunk. This is what we call the fitted luggage. These are your standard cases. This is what is known as the hat box in here. Hit that side. So if you had a hat, you would put the hat in there for the ladies of the time. And the reason we had these type of trunks on the cars at that era is that 1935 and 1936, most cars did not have a big enough back end to put a trunk in. That was really used as an accessory area for a tire. We're now looking at the inside of the driver's compartment of the Packard convertible sedan. What you're seeing over here on this side is a glove box, which was for the passengers, and on the far side an additional glove box, which was for the driver's side. And the instrumentation across the dashboard gave you all the gauges that were necessary for driving the car and maintaining the car. You had individual wiper motor controls, which were this button here and the far button over there. And the big chrome item in the center opens up the cowl vent, which I'll demonstrate. If you pick up and saw the cowl vent opening, that's to allow air to come into the car if your top was up and you're driving down the highway, because there was no air conditioning back in the 30s. So that was your air conditioning vent. You opened it up and the air flowed under the dashboard and through the driver's compartment into the back seat. This is a full leather interior, full mohair carpets on the floor, leather panels, and the wood moldings here had German inlaid silver that was put in all the way on both sides and on the rear compartment as well. This was a top quality, very elegant car for the 30s. This was America's Rolls Royce in the 30s. My associate over here, Maurice, is going to show you the operation of the rear window that comes up behind us. There it goes up now, as you can see, if you can get in there and do it. Now that's a wind protection unit if you're really driving with the top down, or if the top's up and you put this window up, it makes it sort of like a limousine. It separates the driver, if you wanted to hire a chauffeur, from the people in the back. Most of the time people had it as an accessory and they didn't really use it that often, so we're going to put it back down. You also have a set of footrests in the car, which are accessory items to be bought when they're brand new. And on either side of the passenger sit back, you have a little vanity case. You have a mirror over there on one side, then you have a cigarette lighter there, and then the little ashtray that goes in next to it. And between the two passengers is your armrest that pulls down. for the comfort of the people. Back in the teens when they had these cars, they had individual seats with arms that came out like they did back in carriages in the 1800s. So this is sort of a carryover that came forward from the carriage days. For storage, right at the bottom down here is a little compartment that they have a little silver, and it opens up for a little storage underneath behind the seat. This was a true American luxury car for the era.
I'm here with Mark Rojas, and he's also from the Driving Museum. Can you tell us a little bit about the Packard here as well as the engine?
Yes, by all means. This is a 1936 Packard touring sedan. It has a V12 engine that's noted by the horsepower. It's 175 horsepower, 473 cubic inch. The reason they used V12 back in the day was not for the performance, but was for the smoothness of the engine. Therefore, you wouldn't know that the car was even running, and it works very well in this large vehicle. This V12 Packard engine is actually a three-piece flathead engine. The engine itself, when it's completely assembled, weighs about 1,200 pounds, relatively heavy. Back in the day, they used a lot of steel. This one here, particularly the exhaust, runs underneath the intake manifold, which is a little unusual. Usually the exhaust is up off the side, and they take the heat away from the engine, but this actually helps the engine run better by putting the heat underneath the intake manifold down inside of here. The ignition coils are mounted to the front, fuel pump down in front as well. Starter, and then the oil filter is down here on the side as well.
Overall, this is one magnificent car to drive. It's a real road-worthy car.
I'm here with Richard Stanley. And what did you bring to the Concours today?
I brought a 1928 LaSalle 303 Roadster in the original color, Lorraine blue, with the silver leaf pinstripes.
How'd you happen to buy this car?
I found it at a Cadillac LaSalle Club Grand National meet about 1999, and it underwent about a 4-year every nut and bolt apart restoration. And I actually debuted it here in 2003, where it won Best in Class.
Wow. Well, can we have a closer up look?
Sure, absolutely. I'd like to tell you a little of the history of this car. It's a significant car in the history of the automobile because it's the first mass-produced, professionally styled automobile by a major manufacturer. In this case, General Motors. It was designed as a baby Cadillac in a sense, to be both owner-driven instead of chauffeur-driven, and also to appeal to women who were a big group of new drivers in the 1920s. It was a stylish automobile. It was a big hit. It was designed by a Los Angeles native, Harley Earl, who sold his house in Los Feliz and moved to Detroit and was responsible for the design of 50 million automobiles. One of the interesting things about the car that helped make it a big sales hit in 1927 and 28 was the design of the grille. Harley Earl, the designer, thought that the really chic people who knew automobiles drove Hispano Suizas, and he copied literally the design of the Hispano Suiza grille. One of the other things about the car is the engine compartment, and this particular car has a high compression engine, which is 5.3 for 1928, which most people who know engines know that that's extremely low. Later Corvettes were up around 11 to 1. Also has the nickel-plated oil can here, which comes in handy on occasion. And the big deal about the engine was that it staggered the cylinder blocks, or the heads, so that you could do side-by-side journals on the rods, as opposed to fork and blade, which was more expensive and not as strong in the earlier years. It's a flathead V8, by the way. Cadillac invented or introduced the V8 engine in 1915 and was known for them. It's an aluminum crankcase, a lot of aluminum, no air filter, interestingly, and it has a water pump with a little thing you turn there to lubricate it with a special waxy lubricant. As far as I know, all the numbers match because I have the build sheet from Cadillac, which guided me in the restoration. It was basically a barn find car that was put away in a garage in 1943 in Sherman Oaks and not driven legally on the street under its own power until 2003 when I finished the restoration. This particular car is known as a six-wheel car because it has dual side mount wire wheels, which were the sort of upgrade wheels for the car, which originally had either disc wheels or wood artillery wheels. and also has an accessory trunk, and the spokes are also nickel plated. So it was about a $3,000 car when new in 1928. When the second owner bought it 5 years later, because of both depreciation and deflation, he paid about 10% of that, $295 or so. The interior on this car is rather plain. It's black leather, and it's smooth leather because it was easier to keep clean. Remember, this is a roadster. There were no roll-up windows, so the car was definitely, as the widow of the second owner told me, a fair-weather car. So things got dirty inside, but one of the nice things that I particularly like is that I was able to replicate the original floor mat, which is a very Art Deco-looking rubber floor mat. And a lot of cars you'll see like this with carpeting, which is completely incorrect, again, because of the lack of real weatherproofing and subject to rain and dirt and mud and so on. So the rubber mat is very rare and very interesting for 1928. It's all nickel plate, by the way, inside and out. The next year, General Motors introduced chrome plating. Because the car is a roadster, it has a rumble seat, but it also has the golf bag door right here, which I use for the ubiquitous folding chairs instead of golf bags. The body has a nice thunk when you shut the doors because the body is actually made of wood, hardwood, and the steel is merely a skin. It's not structural. One of the other features of this car is it has just one brake light, no turn signals. Again, a precautionary thing to do when you're driving is make sure people understand hand signals. And it has one brake light, and here it is. One of the interesting things about this particular model, being that it's an open car, or in this case a roadster, is that the windshield was a Harley Earl design, and normally most cars of the era would be up like this. This one tilts back farther to give it a more rakish angle, but the way that you'll always see these cars photographed is with the windshield down. Gives it a much more European and sporty racing kind of. In fact, these cars won first and third in the 27 and 28 Mille Miglia in Italy. They were raced actually in those years and won against some of the biggest marques in Europe. Now, because of the roadster design and the Harley Earl, or otherwise known as Fleetwood folding windshield here, when you're driving at speed, in this car, one of them went over 100 miles an hour, a scary thought. But anyway, you need to take a little precaution when you drive that fast. If it's cold, you need the gauntlets and the helmet. And usually any time over 40 miles an hour, if you don't have sunglasses on, you might have your eyelids blown off your eyeballs without the goggles. So it's a fun car to drive, scary in modern traffic because it handles like a really old, heavy steering. Every arm and leg is doing something to control this car. It's a non-synchro mesh transmission, so you have to double clutch. It's heavy steering and very slow to brake and hard to maneuver. So it is not a nimble car and requires a lot of attention, and defensive driving is the watchword with this one.
I'm here with Tom and Chanel Kazamek. And what did you bring to the Concours today?
A 1935 Delahaye.
And could we have a closer-up look, Tom?
Absolutely. This is a 1935 Delahaye Model 138. It's also called a 135 Sport Coupe d'Alps, and it was named for Delahaye's success in a race called the Coupe d'Alps race back in the day. It's one of 13 Delahayes built that year, and it is one of two cars that were originally bodied as saloon cars. We are the fourth owners of this car. The original owner owned it from new up until the 1990s, and we purchased it 1 year ago today, and we had it. We bought it in the United Kingdom, and we flew it here in time to do a 1,000-mile rally here in Southern California with it. And it's one of our favorites. It's just a really great rally car and really beautiful piece of automotive artwork. The bodywork is designed from the two Model 138 race cars that were built in 1935. You can see the original grille work and the large headlights that were part of the period design. The color of the car is French blue with claret red interior. It's pretty tight in terms of the space that you have available inside, but very comfortable. Large steering wheel. Unique feature of the car is it has a Wilson pre-selector transmission, which means you change the gear that you want to go to, and it doesn't actually change until you actually engage the clutch and then disengage it again. So it takes a little getting used to drive a pre-selector gearbox, but it's just a really wonderful driving car. The car still has its original motor. It is a 3.2 liter Delahaye straight 6-cylinder. You can see it has triple carburetors. These are the original Solex carburetors that came with the car. Everything is period correct and accurate on the car, with a couple tiny exceptions of what we've improved it for doing road rallies.
I'm here with Jack Nethercutt, and what an honor to see you again.
It's my honor. Thank you.
And what all did you bring to the Concours this year?
We brought 3 cars, a 1937 Tabulago, a 1931 Bugatti, and a 1912 Didion.
Can we have a close-up look, and which one would you like to start with?
We can start with the Didion since we're standing right in front of it.
Okay.
All right, this is a 1912 Didion. It was purchased by a man in New York. The chassis was. He was sent over, and then a body was put on it in New York. So the body number is number 1, and the engine number is number 1. Now the engine's a little different. It's the first 4-liter that Didion made, and it is also a V8. A V8 in 1912 is very unusual. We restored this and took it to Pebble Beach, where it won its class. It's what I call my cutie pie, because it is just a little cute thing, and it just purrs along. It doesn't chuggity-putt like antiques do. It just purrs. As I said, on this car, probably the most unusual thing is the engine. It is a V8. It produces about 25 horsepower. It has 2 main bearings, one at each end of so the crank has to be going up and down like crazy. And as you can see, it's full of bling. I don't know why Didion did it this way, but that's the way it came originally, and that's the way we restored it. This is a 1937 Tabulago, model 150 CSS. This car won the Best of Show at Palos Verdes in 2006. It is a one-of-a-kind. It's the only Tabulago that has the front skirts. This car has actually been at the Bonneville Salt Flats and did 133 miles an hour. As you can see, it is an extremely beautiful car. And for a 1937, it is very, very streamlined. Okay, the engine on this car is a little unusual in that, like I said, it has 7 main bearings. It's 255 cubic inches. It is a pushrod camshaft, and it is a Hemi. We don't know exactly how many horsepower it actually produces. When we had it on the engine dyno, we got 150 horses out of it at 1,500 RPM, and it does rev to 5,000. This car is a 1931 Type 51 Bugatti. It started off in life as a Formula One car, and in fact it still is a race car underneath this body. A man by the name of Biff bought it after the factory was through racing it, and decided to make it into a coupe, which he did in about 1936. It's a one-of-a-kind because there are no other Type 51s with coupe bodies on. But it is a pure race car underneath this body. This car also won Best of Show here at Palos Verdes Concours. I'm not sure of the year. I think it was in 07 or 08. The engine on this car is the original racing engine. It is supercharged. It's a 2.3 liter. Puts out about 185 horses, and on fuel, which of course is what they ran in those days, probably over 200. The car is quite capable of reaching close to 150 miles an hour.
I'm here with Peter Mullin. He and his wife Merle are the Grand Marshals of the Concours this year. Peter, thank you for coming and being the Grand Marshals. This is just a wonderful event.
Well, spectacular site. I think 20 years, 20th anniversary of the Palos Verdes Concours, and couldn't pick a more beautiful site or a more beautiful day.
Can you talk a little bit about your museum?
Well, we have a museum in Oxnard, California that used to be the Otis Chandler Automotive Museum, and we took it over about 6-7 years ago and have devoted it to the Art Deco movement and to particularly French cars from the 30s and the 20s, which are kind of the bellwether of the entire Art Deco movement itself.
And what did you bring to the Concours today?
Well, we brought three cars to the concourse today. A 135 Delahaye, Fagoni and Falaschi, one of the Geo Ham cars that was in India for a number of years, the Maharaja car, and then the 1939 V12 165 Delahaye that was New York World's Fair car, and then the car behind me is a 1935 1935 C25 Voisin that we showed last year at Pebble Beach, and we're lucky enough actually to win. So we were thrilled with that.
Could we have a closer-up look?
Sure. As you can see by looking at this car, Gabriel Voisin was an extraordinary engineer and designer, but he got started designing airplanes. Built 15,000 airplanes that flew in World War I. All of the great powers flew Voisin aircraft except Germany, of course. And then in 1919 he started building cars, but he picked up the aerodynamic engineering. As you can see, these struts that hold the fenders from rattling. And of course the Avion Voisin front badge on the radiator indicating that his first efforts and highly successful efforts were building airplanes. The entire car is an example of Art Deco. So as we walk around the car, you can see with the special louvers that were built in here and the Art Deco style door handles. The interior was quite exceptional in that it was an Art Deco fabric that was designed by Gabriel Voisin and then created on a special loom in France. That exact same loom, as a matter of fact, we used for the recreation of this upholstery. So different ladies on the loom, since this was done in the 30s, but the same exact pattern. The top of the car is very interesting because the entire roof slides back from here and opens up the entire car as it slides back all the way to the trunk. There are 3 rectangular windows in the top of the roof, and as they slide back, the last one hits the rear window so that from the rear view mirror you can look out the back of the car even when the top is down. Obviously the spats on the rear, which give it a particularly Art Deco feel, and all of the hardware on the car. These are lights, fender lights, but cast aluminum, which are particularly Art Deco. And the entire rear end of the car also has that very swoopy aerodynamic look. Voisin was interested in a couple of things: aerodynamic, styling, and lightweight construction, manufacturing, and speed. So 9 of these cars were made, 5 or maybe 4 are left in the world. This is one of the 2 with the rectangular windows on the roof. So we're very excited to have it in our museum collection, but particularly to have it here today at Palos Verdes. Well, this is one of our special cars in the collection. This is 1937 135M Delahaye, one of the 11 Geoham series that Fagoni and Falaschi designed in the 30s, starting with the 36 Paris exhibition and running for several years. This car was bought at the Paris Salon in 37 and then taken immediately to India, where it stayed for about 40 years, a little longer, originally brought by Monsieur Jord, and then subsequently sold to the Maharaja of Jaipur, who had it in his collection for a number of years. Ultimately, it ended up in Jodhpur, essentially rusting away in a shed when Peter Agg of England found it, brought it back to England, restored it, and then we ultimately bought it and finished the restoration. So this is one of the great Fagoni designs of the swoopy sculptural style with the covered front wheels, covered rear wheels, and I think maybe one of the great examples of rolling sculpture. And it's one of the special cars in our collection that we thoroughly enjoy. This car is the 1939 World's Fair car, sent over by the French to the World's Fair in New York in order to demonstrate the French excellence in design, engineering, performance. This is a V12 Delahaye 165, one of two made. The war broke out. The car was extended into 1940 at the World's Fair because it was so popular, and then the war broke out, and so it never went back to France. It sat on the docks in New York for 7 or 8 years during the war. The engine had been separated from the car because it was standing on a stand next to the car in the World's Fair. We were lucky enough to find this car after it had been all over the world in, believe it or not, Fresno, California. And so we were able to acquire it, and then we found the original engine in Germany. And so we married the engine and the car back together, and the car was a complete mess. It had been used as a fort for kids to play dirtball fights in, and mice lived in the back seats. So 10 years later, we brought it back to its original style and condition that it was in the World's Fair. So one of the great examples of Fagoni styling you can see with the long flowing fenders, the covered again front wheels, the short windscreen that's canted back and can roll down down to the bottom of the cowl here, so then there's no windscreen at all. And beautiful flowing lines all the way to the back, a jump seat in the back for the mother-in-law. And so one of the great examples of the French art form in the 30s, maybe the greatest example of the combination of artistic design, sculptural flowing body, and the big V12 4-liter engine with 3 overhead cams in it. So it's a real pleasure for us to have it here in Palos Verdes at this great concours in this great setting among all the rest of these beautiful cars that are here today.
Good to see you again, Peter.
Nice seeing you.
Oh, this is a fantastic event. How many people would you say?
I think we're expecting around 4,000 today.
And how many cars?
We have a little over 200 cars here, 21 classes. One of the classes is a motorcycle class. But maybe I could just divert a little bit. Yesterday we had our road rally, and Peter Mullin is our Grand Marshal this year. And I never thought that he would bring a Delahaye to the road rally to drive, because this is a very expensive car that I'm standing in front of.
And you drove it into the concours this morning.
Yeah, I did, but let me tell the story. So Peter Mullin and Merle, who are co-grand marshals, drove it in the rally about halfway through, and I get a phone call, and he says, "Peter, I have to leave, so you take the car." So I said, "What?" All of a sudden, I'm driving a Delahaye through Palos Verdes, trying to find a place to park it overnight, and I did find find a place at Terranea, one of the villas, and then this morning I had the privilege of driving this jewel over here to the Concours, and it's a 1937 car. The suspension is very nice, and of course this design, where the front wheels are totally covered, so that's a little bit of an engineering feat, as you can imagine. So I was pretty excited to drive this car for the last couple days. I'm telling Peter, I almost feel it's mine now. So
Peter better watch out.
That's right. That's right.
Well, good to see you again.
Good seeing you.
I'm here with Jennifer Schwab. And what did you bring to the Concours today?
A 1909 Delahaye.
How'd you happen to buy this car?
Russo and Steele about 2 years ago. My husband is a car collector, and we were sitting in the stands, and this came up for bid. And normally I just kind of sit back as a non-participant, besides maybe giving him a little feedback on aesthetics. But this one I absolutely fell in love with instantly. And I think it's because the combination of the brass and the copper was very exciting, and I just thought it was very cute.
Can we have a closer-up look?
Absolutely. This is how you actually start the car, but we have also an interior button that allows you to start it from the inside. But that's how they used to do it back in 1909. You have to be careful though, because it can jerk back and you can actually break your arm. So hence we've put in some safety precautions inside the car, which I'll start it for you in a second. Okay, so this is a 4-cylinder engine, and while it's not all that powerful, back in 1909 it really worked. Our top speed now in this is about 20 miles an hour, so I would never take this out on the highway. So another feature is the oxygen settling system, and you actually light the lights manually, so they're gas-powered lights instead of the traditional electric lights that you fire up from the driver's seat. The mechanism to use the lights was this process, which was very crude, but we've come a long way since then. You used a combination of stones and fuel to light the headlights. We aren't using that though. That's just kind of for show at this point. The button I told you about to start it, rather than using the crank, you can start it right here. Would you like to see how it starts? Did we give it a shot? Okay. So instead of using the crank, we actually have an option to start it electrically. You move this gauge to the left, and then you sneak your hand down here. And there you have it. So if you look over here, these are oil gauges. And as you can see in 1909, this is much more of a manual process, understanding where your oil levels are. Today we have these really simple instruments that make it easy for us. It's called a total loss oil system. So you actually put enough oil in for the car to run about 100 miles. Once you've run 100 miles, then you have to drain the excess, and then you're done. You have to refill it all over again. This is the fuel tank, and this is one of my favorite features of the whole car, this copper, this bright penny copper. Anyway, really difficult to maintain, but beautiful to look at. And as you can see, it doesn't hold that much, so you're not going very far in this car.
I'm here with Ken Smith, and what did you bring to the Concours today?
It's a 1936 Delahaye. It's a 135 competition convertible.
And it's won here at the Concours. Can you talk about that?
Well, last year it was best of show and first in its class of pre-war European, and it's won quite a number of best of show all over.
Can you talk a little bit about why you bought this car?
Well, when I saw the car for the first time, which was at a car show, I thought, that's the most beautiful car I've ever seen. And knees got weak, and I sort of tracked down the owner and finally was able to negotiate something with him and buy the car. But it's been in the hands of private collectors for all the time it's been in the United States.
Wow. Can we have a closer-up look?
Absolutely. Well, I guess my favorite thing about the car is the design. As I say, when I saw it, I thought it was the most beautiful car I'd ever seen. And that is due to the fantastic styling that was done by Joseph Fagoni of the coach building firm Fagoni Falaschi. This was the first of the streamlined convertibles, and it was the one that Claude Fagoni said that Joseph devoted many hours, because it was his first of the streamlined coachwork that for which they would become famous. I can point out for you some of the things that make it really kind of neat. If you'll notice this line, starting with the hood ornament, it follows all the way back, and if you'll notice at the windshield, and I'll just walk over there and point that out, you have this line coming up and then down again, and so this is carried through, and then in the rear of the car, that line is carried through as well. You can see the soft top, how it comes over this, and this line at the spline of the car comes down, and there's chrome coming up, which is also mirrored on the two fenders, one on either side. You also have the teardrop fenders in both front and back, as well as the covered rear wheels. It also has a folding windshield, and when the convertible top is lowered, it's a disappearing top convertible, and it was pioneered by Fagoni on this car. So the streamlined look continued from the beginning, from the front to the rear. Well, this car is also a competition model. It has both competition engine, which you can see here, and you'll notice that it has 3 carburetors on the opposite side, and those are matched carburetors. They're Solex 40 PAI carburetors. This car was raced. It was raced by a famous French racing team. We actually have a photo of it being raced in 1949 at Rally de Monte Carlo. The beauty of these cars is that they would run all day long at 100 miles an hour. So for the time, 1936, that's pretty fast, and it won a lot of races. Another interesting feature is the way the doors open. They call them today suicide doors. But I'll open that for you, and you can see inside that the interior picks up the exterior color. The exterior is a French color called bleu foncé, which literally means dark blue, but on this particular car, it's a combination of blue, black, and white, which gives it a lot of depth. We're not seeing the full depth today because of the overcast skies, but it's coming. Inside, you can see the ostrich interior and the dark blue piping and the dark blue carpet, and also you'll notice that it has a turned metal dash. So very elegant interior with the turned metal dash and the ostrich. It all sort of works together. Here's a little pouch that was used for various odds and ends. It has an original owner's manual, very rare, and so I keep that in here. And in the rear of the car, if you can see in there, there's fitted luggage, and it's the reverse color. It's dark blue ostrich with the lighter gray piping and handles.
I'm here with Bill Baker. And what did you bring to the Concours today?
Well, today we brought the 1941 Cadillac Series 75 limousine. And this is a fresh restoration. We just finished the car 2 days ago.
Wow.
So it's really the first time out and the first time it's been on the road this far, other than around our neighborhood. So it was quite an adventure getting it here and quite exciting to be here.
Now, I understand you picked your wife up from the airport in this. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes. I put on a chauffeur's cap and pulled up and put her in the car in the back seat, and I gave her a bottle of water and some flowers, and then put her luggage in the back, and then drove her home and she had her hat on, drove her home with the back seat and acting like the limousine chauffeur that I was.
Well, can we have a closer-up look?
Absolutely. Once we get inside the hood, you can see it's a pretty standard flathead V8 for a Cadillac, but the interesting part is the engines from the 1941 Cadillacs were the ones used on the Sherman tanks in World War II. But they built them differently for the Sherman tanks. They had a left-hand rotation and a right-hand rotation. So depending upon which side of the vehicle the Sherman tank the engine was on, it was left-hand or right-hand. All of these engines that we have in the cars today are the correct for the Cadillac for the 1941. Cadillac of this era had some amenities that aren't offered in cars today. First, the wood grain burl interior. I sort of went overboard and I put real burl on this, just like you see in Rolls Royces. But in the back seat, if you have more than 3 passengers, you have 2 spare seats that pop up from the floor that extra passengers can sit in. So it goes from seating 3 now to seating 5 or 6, depending upon how little you might be. Cadillac had a reputation for excellence through the years, and one of the things about the driver's compartment where the limousine driver, the chauffeur, would sit were sort of the signs that you didn't have to think a lot to look and see if things are going well. The temperature, battery, gasoline, and oil pressure gauges are all in one location with a little dial that indicated if you were getting into an area where you maybe not want to be. The rest of the car, the radio, the clock, there's another clock in the back, those are all pretty standard features for Cadillacs of the era, and the look that you see on the dash with the wood effect, that's all hand painted to look like wood on a metal dash. So Cadillac had all of the ultimate touches that you could want in a very fine car, and here you see what was modern in 1941. Hi, this is Bill Baker again, and this time we're with our 1949 Bentley Mark 6 Park Ward drophead coupe. Now the drophead coupe part means it's a convertible. The Park Ward part means it was built by the Park Ward Body Company on a Bentley Mark 6 chassis. The interesting thing about this car is that when it was issued from the factory, according to the build sheet, it had 2 marks, 2 little placards that were put on the car, and down here you see 2 of them, the AA and the RAC, the Royal Auto Club and the Auto Association, from 1949 in England. In the passenger compartment, passenger side of the front seat, we have the toolbox. And the toolbox is unique to the Bentley in that it has all of the tools that the Bentley engineers thought that a driver would need to do on-road repairs if something broke down. And it included light bulbs, wrenches, sockets, different things that they thought we might need. So it's here. They're very tough to find if you want to find a missing tool. So this is a complete set. Another interesting part of the 1949 Bentley was that the engineers and the manufacturers included some of the repair items you need within the engine compartment. And those include the oilers and greasing machines that are mounted on the side of the wall here in the engine. On the other side of the engine is a handy little device that you need, and that is a battery-operated, a plug-in battery-operated flashlight that hooks into the dash and will provide light at the evening times if your car were to break down. So the Bentley engineers were prepared for drivers who drove their cars, the Bentley cars, everywhere, anytime, and anytime something broke down, which they hope it didn't do, they had all the tools necessary to do the repairs on the road. Here we have the flashlight that Bentley provided for the drivers to use if it broke down at nighttime. And the flashlight is just pressure mounted, and it has a little connection in the back that connects to a point on the dashboard where it plugs in like an electronic plug, and you can use the flashlight to point all over the car. Really unique device, and we don't have them in modern cars, do we? After I acquired the car, I wanted to know its history. I knew what the gentleman from whom I purchased the car said about the car, but I went directly to the Bentley Owners Association, and they provided me the build sheet. And that showed what was installed in the car, when it was installed, the serial number, and the date. It also showed who first purchased the car and when it was delivered to the first owner, Major Owen Firth. As you look on this build sheet, you can see the ownership from 1949 through 1961. Now, when I first purchased the car in 1980, I didn't know who owned it from 1961 to 1980. But as you look at these other photos that are taken from clips from the TV show in England called Gideon's Way, the Gideon's Way TV show had this car prominently displayed in several series, but the provenance of this car is traced from 1949 to 61 to the mid-60s when it was clearly on the TV show, to 1980 when I bought it from a man in Century City, until today when I've had it in Villa Park ever since then. So it's a great car to drive, a lot of fun to drive, lots of attention, and I thank you so much for looking at my car.
I'm here with Jim Wangers. And what'd you bring to the Concours today?
Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't bring a car, but I brought a guy. And the guy is standing right next to me, Mr. Tenney Fairchild, who happens to own what I will consider the most famous GTO ever created. Tenny, I'm going to ask you to say a few words about this car and what it means to you to have it.
Okay, hand that rascal over. For me, it started out as a little guy. My dad used to work with Jim Wangers at the ad agency in Detroit, and he'd take me into the office, and Jim would give me these promotional model cars, and we knew he had this cool car out in the garage. Now, this would be 1964, so I was a little meatster. And my recollection is stuck to that back glass like a Garfield, and that turned me on to fast cars from the get-go. And it turns out there's even a bigger history than that, but my personal history is pretty big to me. And Jim can fill you in on the rest of the details of why the car exists, because it would not exist were it not for he.
Can you fill us in on that?
I certainly can. Well, this is indeed a very, very special GTO. We introduced the car in 1964, hung the name GTO on it, which already had received some significant press. The name itself belonged to the FIA, the Federation International Automobile, who used it as a racing class. A rather famous car maker out of Italy, Ferrari, had already gathered the name for a model of their own. But they didn't own it, which did allow then for Pontiac to use it on their very special car. And this is indeed a very special car. In 1964, Pontiac introduced its first front-engine, rear-drive, intermediate-sized car, which was called at that time Tempest. The Highline model was called Le Mans. The idea of stuffing a big engine into a small car, while not necessarily original, having been done by the hot rod community for many years, was picked up by Pontiac and given the name of this special new mid-size car, which now featured a 389 cubic inch engine instead of the 326 cubic inch engine, which was standard in the Tempest and the Le Mans. The result was an outstanding car with absolute mind-blowing performance, available for $2,500 for just about anybody that had the money or had the credit to come in and buy one. What we decided to do was to see if we couldn't get a leading magazine. In this case, it was Car and Driver magazine, to do a comparison, in a sense really a tongue-in-cheek comparison, between this new upstart $2,500 Pontiac and what was perhaps at that time, and maybe even today, the greatest serious supercar ever produced, the famed Ferrari GTO. Car and Driver magazine agreed to do it and compared then this $2,500 Pontiac with this very, very expensive and very, very renowned Ferrari GTO, just because they shared the name GTO. Well, the reality is that this car, the car that I'm standing in front of, was exactly the same car. Not a likeness, not a similarity, the exact car that was used in that comparison test way back in 1964 by Car and Driver magazine. This was a very special GTO. In fact, it was so special that we were able to put a 421 cubic inch engine into it, which replaced the 389. Only those who really knew and really understood what to look for could spot the difference. Obviously, the folks at Car and Driver did not spot the difference. The car performed magnificently, and although it didn't beat the Ferrari, it was competitive and established an image which got the GTO off the ground like no other car in American automotive history.
Little GTO, we're really looking fine. 3 deuces and a 4-speed and a 389. Listen to her tacking up now. Listen to her whine. When you turn it on, wind it up, blow it up, GTO. Yeah, baby.
There you go. We're going to look at this very special GTO and point out some of the specific differences that made it so competitive when it was compared to that Ferrari. As we look at the engine, you can't tell it by looking at it, but it is actually a 421 cubic inch engine, which was just flat not available in the GTO in 1964, except that it was in this car. Looking at it from the exterior, unless you know exactly what you're looking at, there is no way that you can tell the difference. Now, the car was painted in the popular red color that was very famous for the GTO in that year. Buccaneer Red was its name. Other than the fact that it enjoyed the special spinner wheel cover, it did not have any exterior differences. You again can't see any visual differences between a production GTO in this beautiful red color until you see it identified as a Royal Bobcat, which meant that it had been through the service department at the famous performance dealership in Royal Oak, Michigan, Royal Pontiac, who had fathered the Royal Bobcat package, which in effect in the 1960s was nothing more than a series of high-performance modifications that almost anybody could do to a car. They put richer carburetor jets. They opened up the air cleaner so it took in more air. They gave it the lock nuts on the rocker arms, which prevented the hydraulic lifters from pumping up. Obviously, the car was equipped with a dual exhaust. It had the famous tri-power option, which was the 3 two-barrel carburetor option. Very, very famous for Pontiac at the time. It was equipped with a dual exhaust system. Nothing but the standard dual exhaust, which was reasonably functional and gave the car enough breathing to be able to take advantage of the changes, the modifications that were made that didn't make the car into a race car, just made it a very satisfying, good performing street car. One of the things that is very, very significant and very specific are what we call the exhaust splitters, which in 1964 were a very popular option. Now, that didn't mean that there was 2 exhaust systems on either side of the car. That simply was an extension to the exhaust pipe that came back on this side of the car and was put through what we called a splitter, which gave it the look of 4 exhaust pipes on the car, 2 on each side. It was a styling option and turned out to be very, very popular. Perhaps the most exciting part of this car is to drive it. Let's open the door and take a look at what is really a very normal kind of a bucket seat configuration. It did not have a console because we were trying to save weight, to try to keep the car looking as stock as it could be without actually carrying any extra weight. A console, for example, would have added 30 pounds. The car itself, other than the fact that it had a very, very finely tuned street engine, did not give any idea or project any characteristics that would suggest that it was something special, that it was in fact a race car. In fact, it was a real sleeper, which is exactly what it was designed to be. And it got to the point, particularly in the Detroit area where these cars were manufactured, that any car that carried a Royal Bobcat emblem was generally considered to be a pretty exciting car and one which you maybe didn't want to mess with. The other option, which was part of this package, was what we called our wood sport steering wheel. Now, of course, it was designed to look like wood, but it was, in fact, a plastic wheel. But it gave the look of a real classic wood steering wheel. At that particular time, there was some pretty severe negatives surrounding wood steering wheels, as they had a history of breaking and cracking in the event of any kind of an accident or any kind of an interruption. In my closing discussion about this particular car, I would like to point out that this car and driver story, comparing this Pontiac at $2,500 to this magnificent Ferrari, turned out to be one of the most successful promotions that Pontiac, or perhaps any Detroit manufacturer, ever pulled off. The car suddenly gained an attention factor. It became respected by the performance enthusiasts regardless of age, and at its attractive price became an immediate seller. Initially, when Pontiac brought out the car, they had only intended to build 5,000. They had 5,000 sold within the first 30 days after it was in the dealerships. And so they turned around and increased the production to the point where they built over 32,000 in 1964. Now, as far as that special engine that was in this car and is still in this car, the car and driver folks actually, while maybe suspecting that this was a pretty special car by the way it performed, never really had it confirmed that there was anything special about this engine until I released my book, Glory Days, in 1998. Now, bear in mind, this test was conducted in 1963. And it was in 1998 when I revealed that, yes, indeed, we had a 421 cubic inch engine in this car. While it was a big laugh and kind of a ho-ho in the automotive community, the car and driver folks were a little bit upset and felt that they had been deceived by what they thought was a very responsible car maker, Pontiac. My answer to that, of course, is that whatever.
Thank you for joining Peninsula Seniors Out and About here at the 20th Annual Concours d'Elegance. I'm Betty Wheaton. See you next time.